I do when I walk in the door.
Okay. Shan, I will fill you all in a different recording on everything you, and same with you, Emily. Okay. So here we go. Let me take these picture of these notes so I can send it to them so they don't get behind. All right. Okay. How do you think Montana responded? If we have almost 60% of our population initially are pacifists, how do you think Montana responded?
They not Wally.
That's a good question or good answer. Anybody else have a different one? Guess what? Montana, because of the Lusitania, it changed the minds of almost all the Irish, and nearly all the Germans.
Because mostly on that ship was Irish and German.
Exactly.
Ah.
And they're like, what?
Did they only get like 50 votes to not go to war?
What's that?
Or I think that might have been a second war. But wasn't there like only 50 votes to not go to war?
Yes. You're right. Good.
I think I put that on my poster.
Okay, so in 1917, when the U.S., and I'm just going to say Montana goes to war, we sent 12,500 volunteers, right? People that didn't have to be drafted, people that didn't have to be asked. Then we sent 28,000.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
28,000 draftees, which is when the government says, please go to war for us. So Montana sent 40,500 men. That was 10% of the population, Montana population. It was the most of all states, of any other state in the United States at that time.
Wow.
So once Montana got behind the idea of going to war, we kicked some booty. We put all the other states to shame, didn't we?
Maybe that's why
No, it's not. But listen to what happened.
True.
Why? That's so
Here, how do you think the people who stayed behind, how did they help the war effort? Those that didn't go to war, or the women.
sending
Hudson.
food and being
Right. They increased their farms.
And supplies.
Okay, they increased their farms. Most of these farms were ran by women and children. They went into debt to increase their farms. It was pretty amazing. The mining, like we said, it went 24 hours. Mining went 24 hours. Logging increased 50%. So they just hired more men, okay? The other thing that women did, okay, who's ever heard of Victory Gardens?
Victory Garden?
Yeah. Who's ever heard of a Victory Garden? Do you know what that is? So people in town, right? Say people in Bozeman could, if you were living in town, or maybe living in Missoula, or maybe Kalispell, and you didn't own a farm, right? They would do what is called a victory garden. Good. That's a good question. Nope. what they would do is they turned their front yards and their backyards into gardens. Because even though farming increased, where was that food going? Where was the food going? Going towards the war effort. Exactly. It was going overseas. So people, this is how incredible the patriotism of the time was, right? With a victory garden, the idea was to raise your own food to live off of.
So that all the other food could go to the war.
Mm-hmm. The farmers were sending food overseas.
And then you eat your own food.
Pretty incredible, right? So just stop and think. You're walking down Wilson. Who's walked down Wilson Street before? Yeah, have you walked down Wilson or any part of Southern Bozeman, South Bozeman? Okay. Okay, think about that. In World War I, all those pretty lawns in front of all those beautiful houses, they were gardens. And they had chickens, and they had maybe even had a pig or a cow living in that small little backyard area. Why? So that they would have food to live off of.
That's actually kind of smart.
It's super smart.
Like,
It's super smart. I agree. It's super smart. Super, super smart. It's really, really great. I think we should be doing, I personally think we should be doing it, right? Okay, so that was one thing the women did. Yes, sir.
when robbers stopped robbing your valuables and just started robbing your pigs.
Actually, it did happen quite a bit.
Really?
The Red Cross stepped up. At that time, the Red Cross provided bandages.
What's the Red Cross? I know the Red Cross.
Red Cross, that's all right. We don't all know that. The Red Cross is, it's a non-political organization that provides medical help. Remember, industrialization is not huge. How did you make a bandage? You had to make homemade bandages. You knitted socks, right? You made homemade medicines. And they raised money for the war. Who's watched Captain America?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, now that is World War II, that's not World War I. And in World War I and World War II, this is how they raise money for the war. When Captain America first becomes Captain America, right? Is he actually out fighting? No. He's in a town hall, and his pretty girls behind him dancing. And he's like, come on, let's go kick some Hun booty, right? Well,
Good way to put it.
That's what they did to raise money, okay? They were called Liberty Bonds. But here's what ended up happening, okay? And this is where things get kind of sad, okay? Let's go back to the pacifists, the idea of pacifists and the people who were fighting. Well, it was still the country, not just Montana, but the whole country was still really divided, right? Who knows what the fancy word propaganda means?
Oh.
I've heard of it. Definitely.
Propaganda, we're going to go all the way down to there's a whole section on it. So propaganda is where somebody in power takes control of the media and starts telling you how to think, okay? And they work on your emotions, all right? Rather than facts, they work on your emotions. And so they're like, we need everybody to get behind this war. We need to have a unified country. So they started to develop posters like this and distribute them. This is an example of propaganda. Hun or home, buy more Liberty Bonds. Well, Liberty Bonds is how they were raising money for the war, okay? Hunter home. See, what, does this look like a super crazy, scary person? It's supposed to look like a boogeyman, the Huns, right? This was the military outfit of the Germans at the time. And it looks like he's crouching toward what? The poor woman holding her baby.
Oh,
See, that's called propaganda. Was that truth?
No.
Not complete truth, not exactly,
What's on
right?
the floor, like, on the
Oh,
picture?
Dead people. This is dead people. He has a bloody hand.
Remains.
Oh, I
Damn,
thought
that's dark. Oh, I thought the guy was just a shadow. I mean, honestly,
I thought it was
that's
just
what
like
looks
dead.
It's supposed to be a boogeyman. Here's another, this is less sinister, but it's still the idea. Keep this hand of mercy at its work. So this is all the bad guys blowing up everybody in the war. The Red Cross is the hand of mercy. So if we're taking care of all the wounded people, we need $100 million, right? So again, trying to make, it's propaganda is like only telling you a portion of one side. It's not that it's completely untruth. It just is only focusing on one part. So propaganda started happening. Well, guess what the people of Montana did? They started turning on each other. And it got so bad, you guys, that this is where we're going to get into stories real soon. So they started turning on each other. And if you were German, or if you spoke out against your government, whether it was Montana state government, or whether it was the federal government, you would go to jail. I'm just one person saying, like if Aaron came and told Mrs. Olson, I heard Mrs. Havercorn saying something really bad about Governor Bullock. Now, granted, he's not our governor anymore, but let's say yesterday, right? It's called the sedition law. Sedition means treason. So under the Montana sedition law, it only took one accusation.
What if they didn't even say it?
That's where it gets wonky. Okay?
That's why they turned on it?
No, this is where it gets really sad. I don't like it either. You're right, Hudson. Could turn anyone in who spoke against the government. Who knows what the First Amendment says?
Right of free speech.
What does free speech mean?
You can say what you want, not who you are.
Yep. Doesn't mean that what you say is right, but you have the right to say it.
Yeah.
Right? Even if I say the earth is flat, which is not fact, it's not truth, but I have the right to say it. Right? So the Montana sedition law, you can turn anyone who spoke. So if Aaron went to Mrs. Olson and said, Mrs. Olson, Mrs. Havercorn says she doesn't like Governor Bullock. She thinks he's full of poop. Okay. Under this, Mrs. Olson could then go to our city mayor, say Mrs. Havercorn committed sedition, committed treason, and then I would go to jail. Period.
For how long?
It was anywhere from 5 to 20 years, depending on what the accusation was.
Who is our mayor now?
I actually don't. No, that's our senator.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I actually don't know who our mayor is. That's like,
Me
well,
either.
I'll let you know next week. Okay?
I just did think we had him there.
So, okay, wait, rein it back in. So can you imagine what happened to Germans?
Oh, yeah.
Would like women and children go to jail?
Yep.
Oh, Germans go.
Germans started going to jail just for being German.
Oh yeah.
Reading themselves.
Can they leave?
No, they ended, even after the war, they ended up staying in jail. Anyone, and you'll read about this, and we're going to tell stories about this, anyone who spoke against the government spoke out. Even there was a lawyer, his name, where is he? He was a criminal defense lawyer. I don't see it. He was a criminal defense lawyer, and he said, this is against our First Amendment. And he went to jail for 20 years. Okay? Yeah, pretty crazy. Anyone who spoke out went to jail. It was really, really, neighbors were turning against neighbor. It got so bad that who's been to Lewistown?
Oh, yeah.
Lewistown they outlawed anybody speaking in German. So any child who is German, like let's say, again, men, they're immigrants. They're coming straight from Germany to Montana. If those kids were caught speaking German, their parents would go to jail, right? In Lewistown, they were the first school district to enact that. And what Lewistown did is a whole bunch of people went into the library, both the school libraries and the public libraries, pulled out any book that had any German author and burned them in the street. Talk about against the First Amendment. It's pretty intense. See, this is called mob mentality. This is when people just lose their sound reasoning and just kind of get all worked up, right?
Isn't that almost as worse as like forcing the Indian children to go to school?
It's the same principle.
Yeah.
But this time it wasn't against the natives, it was against the Germans. Why? Because we were at war with Germany, even though the Germans had become American. See how wonkified it gets? Wait till we get to World War II and you hear about the Japanese.
Oh, yeah.
It's really wonky. The other thing, so guess what happens in 1918? The war ends, right? You guys got this
Yeah.
down? Okay, the war ends, and then guess what happens? What? What did you say, Aaron?
Another one hits.
No, another one doesn't hit, not for 20 years. We're going to just go through this real quick. So in 1918, the war ends.
Yay! We're done.
But guess what happens?
Everybody died.
1918, war ends. But two major things happen to Montana. Actually, one major thing happens to the whole world. We have a pandemic. What is the pandemic of 1918? Spanish flu. Guess how many people die worldwide?
Wasn't it like 16? No, wait.
It was 100 million people
That's insane. That's like
in the world. Guess how many people die in the US?
Like,
half of those. More than half.
675,000.
Oh, jeez.
Guess how many people die in Montana?
Most of them.
5,000.
And where's all the rest?
What do you mean, all the rest?
Then, the rest of the world, like,
Do some production.
figure it out.
So here's the US, right? This is how many people. Everybody else that died was in the rest of the world. Europe, Africa, South America, Asia,
325.
Russia, right?
There wasn't much treatment.
Right. Exactly. Wasn't much treatment. We didn't have the world didn't have access to clean water like they do now, clean bandages, things like that. Okay. And the Spanish flu is different than the type of flu we have now, influenza A, influenza B. Although the influenza A, influenza B are a result of the Spanish flu. They're a hybrid of it, but the Spanish flu was just stronger. It was kind of like the coronavirus is like a new type of coronavirus. We've had other types. This was a new type of flu virus that the human bodies had never been exposed to. And so we hadn't built up immunity to our body. Our bodies had not built it up yet, okay? So it's a very similar thing to what we're going through now.
Did China release this one too?
No, it originated in Spain. That's why it's called Spanish. Okay. The other thing that happened was the worst drought in recorded history.
Wow.
And this is really important because what happened after World War I? Called the Great Depression.
Oh.
Right? So this drought didn't just hit Montana, it hit all of the United States, all of central Canada, all of central Mexico, right? It wasn't just Montana that hit this drought.
What about Alaska?
Right? No,
No,
Alaska's not known for agriculture, right? You can't grow a whole heck of a lot up in Alaska.
True.
Not really.
Okay, now we're gonna read some stories. Okay.
Yay.
Yes. So put your stuff away. I want you to be super, super focused. All right. I want you to be able to put your head down. Those of you who want to lay down on the floor, I want you guys to get super comfy, but I don't want you to allow yourself to get distracted. Okay. So if you want to lay down on the floor, that's fine. If you want to put your head down so you can just listen, if you want to just sit there, that's fine. I just want you guys to get comfortable. All right. Because these stories are really, 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 really important. Okay. Did I get that?
I feel like I'm in kindergarten again.
Yes. Good. That's how I want you to feel. Okay. In fact,
Dude, my thighs hurt so much from volleyball.
that means I have your workout. Okay. Are you guys ready? This story. Okay. I need you guys to be quiet. This story is from Livingston. Okay. So this is really close, right? With 21% of Park County men ages 18 to 44 serving in the military, new jobs opened for women in the fields that traditionally employed men. In Livingston, at the largest Northern Pacific repair facilities in the Northwest, so that's bigger than Seattle, Spokane, Portland, okay? Livingston was number one. The railroad primarily hired women as the office workers, but 24 women ended up working as engineers and yard workers. The union made sure they were paid the same as their male counterparts. So again, see how impressive Montana is? When the Northern Pacific Railroad established its Central Division Maintenance Facility in Livingston, Montana, the town became a magnet for men seeking jobs on operational and maintenance crews. One of the first women employees was Natalina Endendi, who had immigrated to the United States from Italy when she was just 5 years old. Her father had immigrated 3 years earlier, but the rest of the family originally were denied passage because her brother was blind in one eye. When they were finally permitted to leave Italy, they went straight from the immigration office to the boat without a single piece of luggage. We were supposed to meet Dad in Chicago, but the day we landed in New York, he took off from Montana because they were building up a crew to Wilsall. Natalina's mother found a job in the garment factory in Chicago. As soon as he could, her father sent money and the family moved to Livingston. The Indendis were one of many Italian families who immigrated to Livingston to work for the railroad. When many of those men joined the army during World War I, the Northern Pacific hired women as office workers. Additionally, 24 women took jobs as engine wipers and yard workers. Natalina Indendi became one of the dirty dozen who wiped down the engines, greased the wheels, and operated the turntables and the roundhouses. She quit in 1921 when she married Marco Parisi, a fellow Italian immigrant and Northern Pacific employer. One of the women who had worked alongside Natalina, however, remained at the roundhouse for 30 more years. The only woman of that generation to work on that long in a labor position for the Northern Pacific. All right, let's read another story. We're going to go up to this one. This one's about the Red Cross. Members of Kalispell's Century Club raised $2,000 for the Red Cross through their store in the Masonic Temple's basement. The 115 liberty-loving women included one who had knit for soldiers 1,000 socks. She knitted 1,000 socks, you guys.
That's impressive.
I don't even know how to, they joined thousands. Isn't that crazy?
That's like a life's work.
I know, right?
How long did that take her to do?
When that, well, it doesn't really say. Okay, we're going to read about this story. This one up here. This one's about ethnicity. This is about when I was talking about the divisions. Listen to this one. Imagine you were one of 12 children on a homestead in Sharpie Creek, east of Billings. Okay, so it'd be around Laurel.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. One day you watch your father hauled into court. A few neighbors testify that they overheard your father say that even if he were drafted, he would not go to war. That day your father is sentenced to 4 years in the state prison for sedition. After that, your mother loses the family homestead because she cannot make bank payments. You and your 11 brothers and sisters are sent to orphanages. Some of them you will never see again. This happened to the family of Faye and Sarah Rumsey and their 12 children, to many others as well. Isn't that crazy to think that happened?
So
That was outside of Billings.
does that mean that like even so for that law, does that mean that it doesn't matter if it's just against like speaking against the government? Oh, gee.
Right? Okay, we're going to talk about, here's some stories of service, some stories from the people who went over. Here's a story of a Native American. Did you know that in Montana? So remember, Native Americans weren't even considered citizens during World War I, right? So the Native American tribes in Montana went to our state government and fought for citizenship. And then after they gained citizenship, they sent over 15,000 Native American men volunteered. Do you think they loved America?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? Even after they've been hurt so deeply, they still loved America.
I think it was because
It's a pretty good place.
What's that? What did you say, Olivia?
Because I think it's their main home and
Right.
if they
You'll
went to
read
Germany, they would get-
You'll read about how one of the chiefs said, "We are American. We are the first Americans. We need to fight for our land." Pretty. Talk about grit and determination. Talk about forgiveness and grace, huh? We can definitely learn a lot. So here's a story of a Native American who went over. This is our last story. In 1917, the U.S. government considered tribal members dependent wards rather than actual citizens. Nevertheless, an estimated 15,000 natives served, and once in France were often assigned the most dangerous duties. They suffered casualty rates 5 times greater than the American Expeditionary Force as a whole. And many, including Peter Barnaby of the Flathead Indian Reservation, earned citations for distinguished service. Do you guys know what it means to earn that citation? Distinguished service by war buffs?
What?
What does it mean, Brody? Distinguished service means you go out and you do things that nobody else does. Again, going back to Captain America, you guys remember how they were looking for the man to do the experiment and they threw that grenade out even though it was a dead grenade. They threw it out. All the other soldiers left, but then he jumps on it to save everybody else. That is something you do for the distinguished service. Is you put your life at risk to save other people. So that's what this man did. Okay, let's one more story. Okay.
So what chapter is this?
This is the chapter you will be reading.
Oh.
Yeah. Have to find the story.
About butter. Maybe a commercial. No, I mean like an old commercial. Like. So you saw
Oh wait,
butter.
there it is. Butter people, that's when people started eating margarine. Okay, not everyone, this is about the hyper-patriotism, okay? Not everyone was caught up in the hysteria of hyper-patriotism. The U.S. District Attorney Burton K. Wheeler refused to prosecute people for sedition based on false or unconvincing evidence. Even when he himself was hauled before the Montana Council of Defense, Wheeler stood his ground. He said it was not a crime to speak with an accent or have an opinion. After that, Council of Defense members tried to get Wheeler removed from his position. George M. Borkeen of the Butte District Court refused to convict people for their opinions about the war. He believed strongly in the rights guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution.
when a Rosebud County rancher was arrested for saying he was not in favor of war, see, that's all he said. He goes, I'm not in favor of war, right? Judge Borkeen found him not guilty. All right. So it's pretty important to start reading it. Do you see why it's important to start to learn history?
So we don't repeat it.
So yeah, so you guys right now at your age, but we have 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds in here, right? Do we have any 11-year-olds? Are we all 12? 11, okay. So if you guys begin to draw that line in the sand now, like, I'm gonna stand for the First Amendment, even if somebody else chooses not to, right? Now is the time to start forming these opinions so that by the time you're in your 20s or 30s and you do start voting in 4 years, you'll know how to vote, right?
Yeah.
You'll be able to look at those candidates and say, okay, I really believe in the First Amendment. Who also believes in the First Amendment? That's who I'm gonna vote for. That's how you make that decision. Okay, awesome, guys. Good job.
Yeah.
Yep. See you next week. I do want your posters, so just leave your posters right on the, okay?
She's been wearing it this whole time, so like.
Just a second, sir. Let me get this.